2016. This is the year we began to fight back, or at least the year they began to be foiled by various events. The Open Borders Brigade began to run out of political capital. On New Year's Eve, migrant gangs had kettled and molested women in Cologne during the celebration.
Ausnahmezustand hier am Bahnhof. Was ist jetzt? Was soll das? Was war das denn?
Initially, this was covered up by the German police and media, who said that the celebration had gone without incident. Again, like with Rotherham, they'd attempted to prevent the public knowing about real crimes in order to avoid a right-wing backlash. Again, like complete morons from the 13th circle of idiot hell, they fail to understand that if you cover something up, the backlash will only be worse than if you had told the truth. It's easier to control the narrative in the daylight than in the dark. Instead, the women who had been touched up by these coordinated gangs took their stories to social media, and then foreign non-Western media outlets such as RT broadcast them. The resulting pressure on Western media forced them to open up 6 days later, and the German police admitted that there had been an incident. Throughout this year, terrorist attacks would begin to increase and increase, reaching a peak around June or July. This had a tremendous effect in causing the backlash against airheaded victim group ideology. Another factor was the evidence from Greek border control agencies showing that only 20% of migrants were from Syria, with the vast majority being economic migrants from other countries. The German government began to put pressure on Twitter and Facebook to remove anti-migrant posts, and began to even prosecute people for comments, and homes were raided over hate speech. In France, a law penalising sexist video games with a new rating system and retraction of tax breaks offered to the rest of the industry was only narrowly shot down. The culprit? 13 members of the French Parliament, led by Catherine Cotel, President of the Delegation for Women's Rights and Equal Opportunities between Men and Women. Axel Lemaire, the French Minister of Digital Affairs, later met with senior figures in the video game industry to discuss measures aimed at battling negative portrayals of women in gaming, presumably to try and bias the legislative process and create a group consensus in the industry that would intimidate people into line. UK Labour MPs also expressed interest in a similar kind of law, which is not surprising. The supposedly impartial and neutral BBC set up a new requirement for employment quotas purely based on race, gender and sexuality, and not suitability for the job or role. The pursuit of equality of outcome over equality before the law is what distinguishes the newly dominant illiberal left from the liberal left, or from liberalism in its broad, general sense. No matter how much it may want to claim ownership of the term, catcalling also became a criminal offence this year. The internet media continued the same behaviour it had engaged in during Gamergate, only on the Hollywood side, as critics of the new female-centric Ghostbusters movie were attacked as misogynistic and sexist bigots. When James Rolfe, popular internet celebrity, made a video calmly explaining why he wasn't going to see the new movie, he was attacked with a storm of articles calling him a sexist, all within the same week and many on the same day, just like in Gamergate, leading me to believe that there must be a Hollywood Journo Pros mailing list too. Universities continue their insanity, pushing bizarre gender ideology, now well beyond the simple biology-derived concept of transitioning between male and female. 70-odd made-up abstract genders from Tumblr are now available for you to pick and choose between, and if someone forgets to call you by your made-up pronouns zip, zap and zop self, you can take them to a tribunal to be penalised. And it's not just in the universities now. We told you this would happen. We told you it was a big deal. In New York, it is now part of anti-discrimination law in employment, and even worse in Canada, where this is the law nationally, thanks to the passing of Bill C-16. Sweden, the poster boy for intersectional feminism and social justice, and ahead of the curve, became even nuttier this year, pushing CEO gender quotas, removing citizens from homes to house migrants, and declaring it had a feminist foreign policy, whatever that means. To top it off, this winter they finally launched the long-planned feminist snow ploughing policy. Normally main roads were prioritised for ploughing, but under this new policy smaller streets and biking paths to daycare centres are prioritised, because it is argued that men use the main roads more and women use these smaller streets more, so it's therefore more feminist to prioritise the more female roads instead. This had predictable, disastrous results, with snow piling up on main roads and preventing people from getting to work. The MP who proposed this plan then backpedalled and claimed that it only failed because it had been implemented incorrectly. Thanks, feminists. So with all these developments, these awful developments, why do I say that this was the year where we began to fight back, or at least where they began to lose? There are two reasons: Brexit and Trump. With Brexit, all the media and most of the parties piled behind Remain. Even the Conservative Party was majority Remain, with David Cameron being a staunch Remainer. The only reason he allowed the referendum was to appease the Eurosceptics in order to get elected. He never considered that he might actually lose the referendum. The British media, apart from a few ne'er-do-well tabloids of ill dispute, pushed the Remain angle over and over again, using every trick in the book, calling Leavers racists and dinosaurs, and leveraging the same kind of victim-based ideology inherent in social justice. They never made an argument to stay in Europe, which everyone could see was a disaster rent by economic strife, high unemployment and mass immigration inflows. They could only articulate an argument based on fear of change and on economic scaremongering. But we did it. We ended the world. The general public had had enough, and Leave won the vote. The Remainers could only gnash their teeth, and David Cameron could only go fuck this shit and saunter off humming ditties.
Right.
The consensus of the new left was beginning to crack, even if it was right-wing populism that was breaking it. The same in America. Donald Trump managed to pull through and win against everyone attacking him at every turn, saying he was Hitler 2.0. It didn't really matter that Donald Trump was a buffoon. It didn't really matter that Donald Trump was himself corrupt, because they'd picked the worst possible arguments to make instead. All they could go on about was how bad he was. They could never make an argument for Hillary. Half of his own party hated him too, and only reluctantly bent the knee when they had no choice. Wall Street was against him. No national newspaper, to my knowledge, endorsed him. Hillary was predicted to win by huge margins, but the shy Tory effect meant that people quietly endured the abuse and voted, and he performed about as well as Romney did. But Hillary did far worse, and she underperformed because the media couldn't really say anything good about her. Nothing that was convincing anyway. She was a progressive corporatocrat with a neoconservative foreign policy who alienated all of the Bernie voters and had deeply corrupt connections to Wall Street and Saudi Arabia. Trump too had his scandals, but in the end it wasn't even that Trump won, but that Hillary lost. She may have won the popular vote, due to the concentration of the population in staunchly Democrat coastal urban areas, but she drastically underperformed Barack Obama in votes and couldn't offer anything to the majority of states, leading to her losing at the Electoral College. Hillary was pushing the new updated centre-left ideas too. She was pushing the wage gap is due to discrimination meme and shilling for BLM. In the end, white cis males in the flyover states became alienated, so she underperformed those states and lost them. This is why I think that this year is a turning point. It's causing the left to self-question and re-evaluate the utility of identity politics. Maybe it's best to return to the materialist working-class roots, and maybe it's best to enshrine the individual over the collective, as befits actual liberal principles. Of course, other leftists want to just continue the same old game of purity spiralling identity politics, because they have too much skin in that game. They'll only learn the hard way when they continue to fail. It's a pity it had to turn out this way though, because the rise of the illiberal left has catalysed the rise of the illiberal right. Perhaps with the rise of right-wing populists everywhere, we'll experience a right-wing era of failure which will only justify the identity politics left. It could go that way too. We could just bounce from the illiberal right to the illiberal left without ever coming back around to liberalism. I hope it doesn't turn out that way. Whatever the case, it's certainly a milestone for social justice. They've been slapped in the face hard. With any luck, the story of their rise that spans the 56 years since the 1960s New Left and sexual revolution ends here, and hopefully this isn't the beginning chapter of 5 decades of the alt-right. See ya.